Before we begin this review, I need to ask you all a question. Are you aware that the colours red and blue do in fact exist, and that they contrast with each other, and this can provide symbolism? Because, good lord, this movie really wants you to know that, and this is going to show the contrast of red and blue at literally any given opportunity. And following on from that, here's a second question. Do you remember Lindsay Lohan? Once a famous child star, first appearing in the 1998 hit movie The Parent Trap, and going on to star in other popular teen movies such as Freaky Friday, Confessions of a Teenage Drama Queen, and perhaps her most well-known role, Mean Girls. But then in the late 2000s, she seemed to just fall off the radar. Why is this? Well, like many famous child stars, it seemed she wanted to try out something a little more adult. And by adult, I mean something so edgy that it seems adult when in reality the maturity is purely performative, and in actuality it's so over the top that it's actually quite immature. This movie was the box office bomb known as I Know Who Killed Me. So, was this movie really bad enough to completely derail this star's career? Well, let's talk about it. What went wrong with I Know Who Killed Me? The film begins with Lohan playing Aubrey, an up-and-coming, straight-laced young adult with all kinds of classy hobbies like creative writing and piano playing. Aubrey's hometown has recently been plagued by a mysterious murderer who kidnapped and killed one of her classmates, and she becomes the next victim, as we get to see him kidnap and torture her in a pretty gratuitous fashion. Eventually, he abandons her by the side of the road, mutilated but still alive, and she is discovered and brought home. However, this girl is claiming she is in fact a different person, and has no connection to Aubrey or her family despite looking completely identical. She claims to be Dakota, a girl from the wrong side of the tracks, raised in poverty who now works as a stripper. And so, the movie tries to follow these two mysteries. Mystery number 1. Who is Dakota, and is she really a different person to Aubrey? And mystery number 2, just who is this murderer, and what happened between him and Aubrey? Now, hearing this description, you might think, okay, well that doesn't sound too bad. But believe me when I say, this is actually quite possibly one of the dumbest movies I have ever watched. But not in a funny way like Jupiter Ascending or even Cats. And I'll tell you why. You know how bad comedies are often considered one of the most irritating forms of bad movie? Well, I will put forward that the second place for that achievement belongs to terrible, pretentious art movies. The type of films that think they're deep and have some kind of meaningful symbolism, when in reality they're as shallow as a paddling pool. And oh god, is I Know Who Killed Me just the poster movie for that. This really is baby's first art movie. It's trying to be deep and dark and edgy, but through the most cookie-cutter use of symbolism imaginable. I cannot emphasize just how overused the red and blue imagery is here. Like, this is so obvious that it actually becomes distracting. But while that's all bad, I guess I still need to explain exactly what makes this movie so dumb. Right, so the idea of a missing person showing up but claiming they are in fact someone else isn't necessarily bad. I mean, the film does go down the obvious route of having Dakota being the absolute polar opposite to the polite and privileged Aubrey, but that's not really the problem here. The problem here is that the mystery that's presented to us is just ridiculous. Pretty much nothing we see realistically supports Dakota's claim of being a different person. The movie puts forward some evidence to suggest she is in fact some kind of alternate personality that has all of a sudden manifested out of trauma and replaced her original personality. I don't think that's an accurate portrayal of dissociative identity disorder, but okay, still a better representation than Split, I guess. There's even a scene where we see a piece of creative writing Aubrey wrote before getting kidnapped that features a character named Dakota that perfectly matches the one we're seeing now. At this point, I expected this to be the smoking gun for the alternate personality argument, but nah, this really isn't brought up again that much. So, what's Dakota's argument for actually being a different person then? Well, first she puts forward the argument that maybe she's Aubrey's long-lost twin, that their parents' original baby died, so her father quickly bought a single twin baby from some junkie in the hospital. Okay, not the best argument, but I guess it's plausible. At least it certainly is when we compare it to the next point. See, Dakota is, for some reason, missing several body parts, the exact same amount as the first girl the murderer killed. So if Dakota wasn't kidnapped by the murderer, how did she lose her limbs? Well, as we are told and expected to believe, it turns out that she and Aubrey had a magical twin psychic stigmata connection, and as the murderer started cutting off Aubrey's limbs, Dakota's just fell off too. Honest to God, this is the excuse they give. And before you ask, no, there's no other supernatural elements to this movie. Hell, this isn't even treated like a supernatural event. It's treated like a legitimate medical condition. This is one of those plot points that is so stupid, I feel I should be laughing, but they couldn't even make this funny. I was completely flabbergasted that they expected me to believe this was the legitimate answer. It's like they were just making it up as they went along. Oh, well, Dakota lost her limbs because they just fell off. That's what happens when a twin's limbs are severed. The other one just magically loses theirs too. Like, I realise that Dakota could well be lying in story, but her explanation is treated by the writing as plausible. Why in God's name does no one say to her, Dakota, that is absolutely ridiculous, that is not possible, there is no denying now that you and Aubrey are the same person. So that's one mystery solved, but what about the murderer? Well, turns out he was the piano teacher who briefly appears in a scene at the beginning where he notably fawns over Aubrey's hands. This completely on-the-nose foreshadowing is the only real explanation as to why he kidnapped Aubrey. I guess he is shown to have various prosthetic limbs hanging around his house, so maybe he had a fetish for amputation? Wow, what a truly fleshed out portrayal of a serial killer. He liked hands. What's annoying about this is that the mystery behind who Dakota really is ends up being so badly written that you just don't care, so the notion that she's just an alternate personality of Aubrey's seems the only rational option. Thus, the mystery of the murderer becomes the only intriguing part of the story. So when it's just revealed to be the obviously foreshadowed limb fetish man, it's not quite as disappointing as the ridiculous psychic twin mystery, but it's still pretty disappointing. Like I say, this movie is so desperately trying to be edgy and deep, yet fails on every level because everything here has just been done before. Yes, I've already seen sexual stripper characters before. I have already seen the symbolism you're trying to shove in my face. And I have certainly seen unnecessary torture porn before. This movie is acting like it's some kind of brand new diamond in the rough when it's really just cobbling together the most obvious symbolic tropes. So, if that's what went wrong, then how would I put it right? Well, obviously I would get rid of all the on-the-nose symbolism, but most importantly, instead of the unbelievable alternate personality plot, I'd just have Aubrey develop amnesia after having been kidnapped. That way, you're only focusing on one mystery, and that mystery is not completely unbelievable. Aubrey doesn't remember what happened, and is spending the movie trying to figure out who kidnapped her and why. And how about, so that there's a time limit, have it so that she wasn't the only girl kidnapped, and thus to build tension, she has to figure out who and where the kidnapper is so that she can save the other victim. Have her try to investigate for clues that'll help her piece her memories together, and, well, since the film showed she was into creative writing, have her try to write it all out like a story, but then show how gradually the trauma is becoming too much, and she's struggling to determine which memories are real and which are delusions. Rather than just trying to be deep through bland symbolism and edginess, really show this character's struggles and her attempts to cope with the trauma that she's suffered, and give the murderer more of a personality than just a guy with a fetish for amputees. Possibly show him creepily talking to her like his possession in her flashbacks, except distort his face and voice. Instead of gratuitous torture porn, just focus on the psychological horror instead. That can be a lot more effective. Really thinking about it, I Know Who Killed Me was kind of ahead of its time. Years later, the artsy horror film has actually taken off. Films like Hereditary, Get Out, Us, The Babadook, It Follows, Midsommar, and more have proven that you actually can make a successful artsy horror movie. But unlike I Know Who Killed Me, those movies actually thought about the messages, symbolism, and psychological fears that they were conveying to their audiences. While your mileage may vary on how well they achieved this, there's no denying they certainly did a better job than this piece of crap. So, could I Know Who Killed Me have worked if it had simply waited and learned from the artsy horror that was yet to come? Well, honestly, if there is a lesson to be learned here, it's this. If you're going to try an ambitious art movie, actually get some experience first. The director behind this film didn't really have many movies under his belt, and like I said, this movie well and truly feels like baby's first art movie. And you really can tell it was very much made by an amateur. While I suppose watching better artsy movies could have helped, I'm not convinced it would have been enough. While art movies can be great when they're done right, not everyone can accomplish that from the get-go. And that, my friends, is exactly what went wrong. Thanks for watching the video. I'm interested to know if anyone here has actually seen this movie, and if so, what did you think about it? Did you like it? Did you hate it? Did you notice the obvious symbolism, and did you find it as obnoxious as I did? Whatever your opinion, let me know down below. Like, share and subscribe and all that jazz, and I hope to speak to you again soon. Goodbye!